The cold night rain poured over the city, each droplet glistening under the dim streetlights. Darkness cloaked the narrow alleys, carrying the ominous breath of those who live beyond the law. Adrian Russo, the infamous mafia boss, rushed through the rain-drenched streets, blood seeping through the side of his black vest. The bullet wound embedded deep in his side sent sharp pain through his body, but he had no time to stop. Behind him, hurried footsteps echoed, accompanied by the chilling sound of a gun being cocked. "He ran that way!" A voice called out amidst the rain. His pursuers were closing in. Adrian gritted his teeth, pressing his hand tightly against the wound to slow the bleeding, forcing himself forward. The twisting alleys formed a labyrinth, but for someone like him, accustomed to the shadows, the city was nothing more than his playground. He abruptly turned a corner, disappearing into the darkness between two old buildings. His breath was heavy, but his sharp eyes remained those of a predator. The footsteps came dangerously close. They were searching, but luckily, they hadn't spotted him yet. One of them cursed under his breath. "Damn it, he's gone!" Another voice, filled with frustration, snapped back. "Keep looking. We can't let him escape." Only when the footsteps faded into the distance did Adrian cautiously move again, his body drained of strength. The pain was excruciating, but stopping was not an option. He needed a place to hide. And then, the flickering neon lights of St. Clair Hospital appeared in his sight. A hospital. The last place someone like him would ever think of stepping into. But right now it was his only chance to survive. He barely managed a few more steps before his vision blurred. The rain continued to pour, mixing with the blood dripping onto the ground. Before the darkness completely swallowed his consciousness, he saw a small figure approaching. Dr. Fiona Carter stepped out of the hospital's back entrance, taking a deep breath to shake off the exhaustion from her long shift. The cold rain sent a shiver down her spine, but her mind was still drifting over the surgeries of the day. But then, as her gaze swept across the parking lot, she froze. A tall figure lay collapsed on the ground, drenched in rain and blood, motionless right in front of the hospital gates. "Oh God!" Her instincts as a doctor immediately kicked in. Fiona rushed forward, kneeling beside him, her hands quickly checking for signs of life. His breathing was shallow, his pulse weak but still there. She touched his soaked clothes. Blood had completely soaked through. A gunshot wound. There was no time to hesitate. Fiona immediately shouted, "Get a stretcher! We have an emergency!" Nurses hurried over, helping her lift the man onto the stretcher. Even in his semi-conscious state, his hand instinctively grasped her wrist, as if clinging to the last remnants of awareness. Fiona looked down in surprise. His hand was large, rough, yet warm. Only when he was rushed into the emergency room did that grip finally loosen. Inside the operating room, the glaring surgical lights illuminated his wounded body. Doctors and nurses moved swiftly, fighting to keep him alive. Fiona, though used to high-stakes surgeries, couldn't shake the feeling that something about this man was different. As she cut through his blood-soaked shirt, her eyes widened slightly in surprise. Scars. Countless scars crisscrossed his body, marks of a past far from ordinary, of battles no one knew about. This man was anything but normal. "Heart rate is stable, but he's lost too much blood," a nurse reported. "Prepare for a transfusion," Fiona ordered, her voice steady and firm. The surgery dragged on for over 2 hours, but finally the last bullet fragment was removed. He had survived. Yet Fiona couldn't shake the lingering question: who was this man? And what had led him to this state? When Adrian woke up, the blinding white light above him made him frown. Pain radiated from his wound, but the first thing he saw wasn't the agony. It was a pair of warm, yet resolute, blue eyes. Fiona Carter, still dressed in her white coat, stood at the foot of his hospital bed, her expression professional. "You're awake." Her voice was calm. Adrian blinked, realizing he was in a hospital. He had survived. But what intrigued him more than his own survival was the woman standing before him. "You saved me?" he asked, his voice hoarse from thirst. Fiona nodded. "I was just doing my job." A faint smirk played at Adrian's lips. A cold and professional doctor. Interesting. But what he didn't know was that, from this very moment, a new game had begun. And this time he was not the hunter, but the hunted. Hunted by something he had never thought he would crave. Love. Welcome back to today's story. Before we begin, how did you like the last story on our channel? Let me know in the comments. I really appreciate all of you for always supporting and sharing your thoughts. Your kind words are my biggest motivation. The negative feedback makes me a little sad, but it also motivates me to improve and bring you better stories. Thank you for being here. Wishing you health and happiness. Now let's enjoy today's story. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Man. Fiona stood silently by the hospital bed, observing the man who had just woken up from surgery. His gaze was sharp, like a predator stirring from slumber, showing none of the frailty expected of a patient who had just survived a critical ordeal. But what caught Fiona's attention wasn't his unusual alertness. It was the scars that covered his body. As a doctor, she had seen many injuries caused by accidents or violence, but the scars on this man were not random. They were not the remnants of an ordinary life. These were the marks of a warrior, and that made Fiona wary, the gaze of a dangerous man. Adrian Russo braced himself against the bed, feeling the sharp pain radiating from his wound. Though still clouded by painkillers, he was fully aware of where he was. A hospital. The sterile air, the stark white light reflecting off the cold tiled floor, the familiar scent of antiseptic. But what caught his attention wasn't the place. It was the woman standing before him, Dr. Fiona Carter. Her hair was neatly tied back, her expression calm but not cold. Her blue eyes held a composed steadiness, devoid of fear, despite the fact that she had just treated a man whose identity remained unknown. "You're awake," she said, her voice steady and devoid of worry or hesitation. Adrian raised blue eyes. He had encountered many types of women, those who were ambitious, those who feared him, those who sought to use him. But never had anyone stood before him unaffected by his presence. Tilting his head slightly, he spoke, his deep voice carrying a subtle, hidden danger. "You saved me?" Fiona gave a slight nod. "I was just doing my job." A simple response, but one that made Adrian's lips curl into an amused smile. He pushed himself upright, but the sharp pain from his wound instantly flared. Fiona observed his movement and remarked nonchalantly, "If you want to leave the hospital early, you'd better not move too much." Adrian looked at her, his eyes glinting with curiosity. An interesting woman. In the following days, Adrian gradually recovered, and during his stay, he began to learn about this woman in his own way. He observed how she worked, calm, dedicated, unaffected by unusual patients like him. He started asking questions whenever she came to check on his wound. "You don't seem afraid of me," he noted one day. Fiona glanced at him and replied at a steady pace, "Why should I be?" Adrian chuckled but did not answer immediately. Instead, he continued to study her, searching for any crack in her composed and professional demeanor. But Fiona remained unfazed. No matter how much he prolonged their conversations or teased her, she maintained her usual professional detachment, treating him as just another patient. And that annoyed him. For the first time in his life, Adrian Russo, the feared mafia boss, a man who made the underworld tremble, was completely ignored by a woman, and he found that intriguing. Fiona's caution. Fiona was not naive. Though she didn't know her patient's true identity, her instincts told her he was no ordinary man. His sharp gaze, his calculated movements, the scars on his body, everything about him signaled that he had survived battles she couldn't even begin to imagine. But he wasn't like other patients. He observed her. Every time she entered the room, she could feel his eyes tracking her movements. It wasn't the usual flirtatious or teasing glance. It was genuine curiosity, and that made Fiona wary. She had no intention of getting involved with a dangerous man. Her job was to save lives, not to get entangled in trouble. So no matter how often Adrian tried to engage her in conversation, she kept her distance. Adrian's determination. Adrian was not used to failure, and yet this woman had the audacity to ignore him? He was a man who commanded fear, yet Fiona Carter showed no interest in him whatsoever. That only made him want her more. He did not like being ignored, but instead of forcing the situation, Adrian chose a different approach. From a cold and dangerous figure, he began to show a different side, one that was persistent, playful, and almost annoyingly charming. He came up with all sorts of excuses to prolong their conversations whenever she checked on his wound. "Dr. Carter, did you know that no light in this hospital shines brighter than your smile?" Fiona shot him a sharp look. "I think you're still in pain. I'll increase your painkiller dosage." Adrian laughed, his eyes twinkling with amusement. She wasn't falling for his teasing. So what? That only made him want to chase her even more. And from that moment on, the game began. A looming threat. But amid the light-hearted conversations, Fiona had no idea that danger still lurked outside the hospital walls. The men who had hunted Adrian had not given up. They were searching for him, and if they discovered anyone getting close to him, they wouldn't hesitate to strike. Fiona Carter didn't know that she had unknowingly become entangled in Adrian Russo's world. She saw him as just another patient, but to Adrian, she had become someone special, and he had no intention of letting her slip away. Chapter 2, A Confession Rejected. The sun cast its warm rays over the city, signaling the start of a new day. Inside the hospital, the atmosphere remained as bustling as ever. But for Adrian Russo, today was different. Today, he was being discharged. Standing before the mirror in his hospital room, Adrian adjusted the collar of his black dress shirt. The wounds on his body had begun to heal, but there was something else, something that no amount of time could mend. A strange feeling stirred within him whenever he thought about Fiona Carter. Over the past few days, he had observed her, learned about her. He knew she wasn't the type of woman who was easily swayed. She wasn't interested in power or wealth, but none of that mattered. He wanted her, and Adrian Russo had never failed to obtain something he desired. The moment of decision. Fiona walked into the hospital room as usual, holding a medical file in her hand. She saw Adrian already standing, dressed in his signature sharp style. "I don't think you should be wearing something so tight yet. Your wounds may not have fully healed," she reminded him as she checked his condition. Adrian didn't respond. He simply watched her, intently. Today, he wouldn't let her leave without knowing how he felt. "Fiona," his deep voice carried an unusual seriousness. She looked up, waiting. "I like you." Silence. For a brief moment, the world seemed to stand still. Fiona blinked, wondering if she had misheard, but the unwavering expression on Adrian's face told her otherwise. He wasn't joking. His lips curved slightly, his sharp gaze filled with a sincerity. "Be my girlfriend." She felt her heart skip a beat, but within a split second she regained her composure. Meeting his gaze directly, her voice was firm and without hesitation. "No!" Adrian froze, his brows furrowed, as if the very notion of rejection had never crossed his mind. "What did you say?" His voice dropped lower, as if he needed to hear it again to believe it. Fiona exhaled softly and repeated, unwavering, "I don't like you." The mafia boss's shock. For a brief moment, Adrian's entire world tilted. Him, Adrian Russo, a man feared and admired, a man whose attention everyone craved, had just been rejected. Not with hesitation, not with an excuse, not with uncertainty, but with a cold, brutal, and absolute refusal. She didn't like him. This was the first time anyone had ever dared to say those words to his face. Every woman he had met had either desired his attention or feared him. They sought him out, tried to win his favor. But Fiona Carter, she didn't even care. Adrian studied her carefully, searching for any trace of doubt, any hesitation in her eyes. But he found nothing. She truly meant what she said. A smirk played at the corner of his lips, a mix of amusement and challenge. "Are you sure?" Fiona shrugged, utterly unfazed by the dangerous gleam in his eyes. "I have no interest in men like you." Her tone was calm as she resumed sorting through his medical records. Men like him? That single sentence struck a direct blow to Adrian's pride. Yet instead of anger, he felt exhilarated. He had thought that once he confessed, she would naturally accept him. But no, she rejected him without a second thought. She truly didn't care about him, and that only made him want her more. When a man refuses to give up. Fiona had assumed that her firm rejection would make Adrian give up, but she was naive. Adrian had never been the type to surrender. He didn't storm off in frustration. He didn't insist or demand an explanation. Instead, he leaned casually against the wall, arms crossed, his eyes filled with an amused glint. "So, you don't like me?" "Correct," Fiona nodded. "Well then," he shrugged, a slow, mischievous smile spreading across his lips. "I'll make you like me." Fiona's eyes narrowed. "You? Don't be so quick to reject the idea." Adrian interrupted, his tone playful yet unwavering. "I don't force anyone. I'll just prove to you that you'll end up liking me." "You're insane." Fiona shook her head. "Maybe," Adrian smirked. "But my only problem right now is you. A predator on the hunt." Fiona watched as Adrian walked out of the hospital. She assumed that after today he would disappear from her life. She had no idea this was only the beginning. Adrian wasn't a man who easily abandoned what he wanted. And now what he wanted was her. He would make her fall for him, one way or another. And the game had just begun. Chapter 3. A stubborn and playful mafia boss. Adrian Russo was not one to give up easily. After being brutally rejected, he should have just walked away, returned to his life, immersing himself in business deals, negotiations, and dangerous schemes. But he didn't. He couldn't stop thinking about Fiona Carter, the stubborn doctor who had dared to look him straight in the eyes and say no without hesitation. If it had been any other woman, she would have been either intimidated or eager to please him. But Fiona wasn't like that, and that only made Adrian more determined to pursue her. The most stubborn patient in history. On the first day after being discharged, Adrian returned to the hospital. When Fiona saw him standing at the door of the clinic, she raised an eyebrow, highly suspicious. "What are you doing here?" Adrian casually stepped inside and sat down, as if this were his office, not hers. "Dr. Carter," he said slowly, placing a hand over his chest. "I have heart pain." Fiona frowned. "You have heart pain?" Adrian nodded, his face dead serious. "Possibly because you rejected me." Fiona almost threw her pen at his face. "You're not having a heart attack," she scowled. "You're just delusional." Adrian shrugged, flashing a wicked grin. "So, do you have a prescription for that?" Fiona inhaled deeply, trying to control her patience. "Yes," she said icily. "Stay away from me." Adrian chuckled, standing up with his hands in his pockets. "I'll keep that in mind, doctor." He winked before walking away. But Fiona knew for certain he had no intention of staying away. Flowers, flowers, and more flowers. Day 2, a bouquet of red roses was delivered to the hospital. Recipient, Dr. Fiona Carter. Sender, the heartbroken patient. Fiona glared at the flowers sitting on the receptionist's desk. "I don't want them," she coldly told the nurse. Day 3, 2 bouquets arrived. Day 4, 1 bouquet with a card. "The flowers aren't as beautiful as you, but they'll have to do for now. AR double quote." Fiona was so furious that she wanted to march up to Adrian and throw the entire bouquet in his face. But she couldn't, not with dozens of curious co-workers whispering about her mysterious admirer. And so, every day the hospital was flooded with red roses, all of which she returned. But somehow they just kept coming, a constant reminder that she hadn't shaken off Adrian Russo yet. A mafia boss in a coffee shop. Fiona had a morning ritual. Every day before work, she stopped by her favorite coffee shop. It was her quiet escape from the chaos of the hospital. Just her, a hot latte, and a few peaceful moments before the long hours ahead. But then one day, her peaceful sanctuary was ruined. Because Adrian Russo showed up. And not only did he show up, he sat right at the table next to her. "Oh, what a coincidence." He smiled, stirring his espresso. Fiona narrowed her eyes. "Coincidence?" "Yes." Adrian shrugged. "Who would have thought we share the same love for coffee?" Fiona glared at him. "Are you following me?" Adrian blinked, feigning innocence. "Following? Me? Never." Fiona crossed her arms. "You've never been here before." Adrian smirked, tapping his coffee cup. "Well, from now on, I'll be here every day." Fiona nearly choked on her latte. "You're serious?" "Completely." Adrian nodded. "Who knows, maybe one day you'll change your mind and agree to go on a date with me." Fiona leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "I don't like you." Adrian raised an eyebrow. Not yet, he corrected. Never, she emphasized. We'll see. Adrian grinned, completely unfazed. The most persistent mafia boss ever. Fiona was getting frustrated. Since when did a feared mafia boss become so annoyingly persistent? But what irritated her even more was that he wasn't as terrifying as she had thought, the cold, dangerous man she had first met. He was still there, but now he was also stubborn, playful, and even a little childish. She hated to admit it, but every time he showed up with his ridiculous jokes, she found herself fighting back a smile. But that didn't mean she liked him, not a chance. The game wasn't over. Adrian never gave up. He knew Fiona didn't hate him. She just wasn't ready to admit she was interested. But that was fine. He had plenty of time. If she didn't like him yet, he would make her like him, little by little. One way or another. Adrian Russo wasn't stopping. Chapter 4. When the walls start to crumble. Fiona Carter was not a weak woman. She had spent years in the medical field, countless sleepless nights, high-stress surgeries, moments of sheer exhaustion where all she wanted to do was collapse in the middle of the hospital corridor. But she never let her body decide when it was time to rest. Unfortunately, her body did not agree with her. From the early morning, Fiona already felt off. A fever burned low in her body, making her head throb. But instead of going home to rest, she simply took a fever reducer and pushed forward. She was a doctor. What kind of doctor lets themselves get sick? She convinced herself that she was fine, but by the time she entered her afternoon surgery, cold sweat had begun to beat on her forehead. Her vision blurred for a second. Her heart pounded too fast. She bit her lip, forcing herself to focus on the incision in front of her. Just a little more. The only one who noticed. By the time the surgery was over, Fiona's legs felt weak. The glaring hospital lights made her dizzy, and at that moment, a deep voice came from behind. "You're sick!" She turned around, already knowing exactly who it was. Adrian Russo. She had no idea why he was here, but that didn't matter. What mattered was, he had noticed something was wrong. "I'm fine," she dismissed quickly, turning to leave. But before she could take another step, a strong hand caught her wrist. "Fiona." His voice was firm. "You're not fine." She frowned, attempting to pull away. But the next moment her balance gave out, dizziness overwhelming her. Everything around her tilted. She was about to collapse. But Adrian caught her before she could fall, taking her home. "Fiona, you're incredibly stubborn." His deep voice rumbled near her ear, but she no longer had the strength to argue. In her hazy state, all she could feel was strong arms lifting her up. And then, the scent of leather seats, the cool air of a car, and a strange warmth beside her. She forced her eyes open. "What are you doing?" Her voice was weak, but she still tried to sound defiant. Adrian didn't even glance at her, keeping his focus on the road. "Taking you home. I can go home by myself." "No." Fiona's fingers curled weakly. "You're a doctor, yet you can't even take care of yourself?" His voice held an edge of frustration. She had never heard that tone from him before. The first time being taken care of. When the car pulled up in front of her apartment, Adrian didn't even ask. He simply picked her up again, ignoring her weak protests. "Fiona, I saw you save me." He raised an eyebrow. "Now it's my turn." She wanted to argue, but her body was too exhausted to fight him. Minutes later, she was tucked under warm blankets, barely aware of Adrian moving around her apartment. Then, the scent of warm porridge filled the air. "Wake up!" His deep voice broke through the haze. "You need to eat something." She was too tired to move. But then, a spoon was held near her lips. Her eyes flickered open to meet Adrian's sharp blue gaze, filled with patient determination. "No," she refused weakly. Adrian narrowed his eyes, then casually scooped up a spoonful of porridge, blew on it, and... "Open your mouth!" She stared at him in pure disbelief. "Fiona Carter, if you don't eat, I'll feed you myself." She nearly choked. "Do you even understand personal boundaries?" "Yes." Adrian shrugged. "I just don't care." She didn't know whether to be furious or laugh, but in the end she reluctantly ate, though her expression remained unamused. She didn't understand why. Why would a dangerous, stubborn man like him be so patient, sitting here all night just to take care of her? A surprisingly warm man. Fiona fell asleep quickly, probably due to the fever medication finally kicking in. When she woke up the next morning, the first thing she saw was Adrian, asleep on the chair. His entire body was slouched forward, one arm resting across his forehead, his breathing steady. In the soft morning light, he didn't look so dangerous. He wasn't the feared mafia boss. He wasn't the persistent man constantly chasing after her. He was just a man who had stayed up all night taking care of her. And at that moment, for the first time in her life, Fiona felt something unfamiliar stir inside her. Something she couldn't quite name. Maybe she had misjudged Adrian Russo. Chapter 5. A dinner that changes everything. Fiona Carter didn't know why she agreed. Maybe it was because when she woke up that morning, she saw Adrian asleep in the chair, his usually sharp face looking strangely peaceful. Maybe it was because the entire night he had taken care of her, as if she was the most important thing in the world. Or maybe it was simply because she had started to see him differently. That morning when Adrian woke up, he rubbed his eyes, finding Fiona already awake, watching him with an unreadable expression. "Morning, doctor." He yawned, stretching against the chair. She folded her arms, her gaze skeptical. "You stayed here all night?" "Yeah, did you think I'd leave you alone in that condition?" Fiona stayed silent. She didn't know how to answer, because the truth was, no one had ever done that for her before. After a moment, Adrian stood up, stretching. "Well, now that you're feeling better, I can finally ask my question again." She frowned. "What question?" His lips curved into a teasing smile. "Will you go to dinner with me?" She was about to refuse out of instinct, but this time, the words wouldn't come out. She hesitated. She owed him a thank you, and if one dinner could settle that debt, then... All right, 2 simple words, but to Adrian Russo, it was the greatest victory of his life. Fiona didn't know where Adrian would take her for dinner. She had expected a lavish evening, perhaps at an expensive Italian restaurant, somewhere with fine wine and a strict VIP guest list. But when she stepped out of the car, the sight before her took her by surprise. It wasn't a luxurious restaurant. It wasn't an elite venue guarded by men holding reservation lists. It was a small diner in the suburbs. Inside, there were only a few wooden tables, the warm glow of golden lights, and the mouth-watering scent of grilled meat filling the air. She turned to Adrian, utterly surprised. "You don't seem like someone who comes to places like this." He shrugged, offering a gentle smile. "I could have booked a table at a 3-star Michelin restaurant if you preferred, but I figured you've had enough of crowded, noisy places." Fiona pressed her lips together. He was right. For the first time, she felt like he truly understood her. A different kind of evening. Tonight, Adrian was not the feared mafia boss. He was not the stubborn man who relentlessly chased after her. Tonight, he was simply a man trying to win her heart. They talked about many things. Work, their likes and dislikes. Fiona shared stories of her medical school years, the countless sleepless shifts, the moments when exhaustion almost crushed her, but she forced herself to stay standing. Adrian listened attentively. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He simply listened with sincerity. And for the first time, she smiled at him. Not a forced smile, but a real one. Something warm flickered in his chest. But happiness never lasts long. A shadow lurking in the dark. Adrian felt something wasn't right. From the moment they entered the diner, he had noticed a pair of eyes watching them from afar. A man in a black coat, seated in a shadowy corner. He hadn't ordered food. He hadn't looked at a menu. He was only watching them. Years of experience in the underworld told Adrian exactly what was happening. That man was not just a stranger. He was a tale. Someone had started watching Fiona. Adrian clenched his wine glass, forcing himself to stay calm. But Fiona, still caught up in their conversation, had no idea about the shift in his demeanor. "Adrian," she asked suddenly, tilting her head, "what do you think about love?" He turned to her, staring intently. Love. Someone like him. A man who lived in a world of blood and crime. Did he even deserve to love anyone? But looking into Fiona's clear, unwavering eyes, he could only say one thing. I think love is the only thing that can truly change a person. Fiona studied him as if trying to decode the true meaning behind his words. And then she smiled. That's a good answer. A silent warning. As they stepped out of the diner, the night air was cool and crisp. Adrian instinctively draped his coat over Fiona's shoulders, his gaze subtly scanning the street. The man in the black coat was gone, but that didn't make Adrian feel safer. If anything, it made him more uneasy, because he knew. This was only the beginning. Someone had discovered how much Fiona meant to him, and in his world, the things that mattered most were always the easiest to destroy. Fiona turned to him, her eyes still bright from the evening's joy. But Adrian knew this happiness wouldn't last, because if his enemies had already set their sights on her, he couldn't stay by her side anymore. Chapter 6. Danger closing in. The New York sky was darker than usual that day. Standing atop the highest floor of his headquarters, Adrian Russo held a glass of whiskey, his gaze sweeping over the endless cityscape. His mind was still caught in the memory of last night's dinner with Fiona. For the first time in years, he had felt something close to peace. But then, everything crumbled with a single text message. A warning message. His phone vibrated. An unknown number. No name. No identification. He opened the message. That doctor seems important to Mr. Russo, doesn't she? Adrian's eyes darkened. Cold. His fingers clenched around the glass, pressing with enough force to shatter it at any moment. When a man like him received a message like this, he knew exactly what it meant. Fiona had become a target. The shadows begin to move. Adrian didn't need to guess who was behind the message. The New York underworld was a constant game of survival. The more power one held, the more enemies lurked in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike. He didn't know exactly who had discovered Fiona's connection to him, but one thing was certain. If they had set their sights on her, they wouldn't stop. People like them didn't send messages just to intimidate. They acted, and if he didn't stop them now, Fiona would be in grave danger. Less than an hour later, Adrian's most trusted men gathered in his underground conference room. On the large screen in front of them, photos of Fiona appeared, taken from a distance. Neither Adrian nor his men had taken them, which meant someone had been watching her. Adrian sat in his leather chair, elbows resting on the table, his gaze razor-sharp. How long? His voice was low, dangerously calm. Victor, his right-hand man, cleared his throat. At least a week. Looks like they've been watching you, and once they saw her, they realized, she's your only weakness. Your only weakness. Adrian's fist clenched. He had never had a weakness. He had never let anyone get close enough to be used against him. But now, he had Fiona, and that terrified him more than anything else. In his world, when enemies discovered your weakness, you had two choices. Protect it at all costs. Destroy it yourself before someone else can. Adrian couldn't choose the first option, because he couldn't always be by Fiona's side. He couldn't force her to live in fear, watching over her shoulder every day, knowing she was being watched, hunted. So that left only one choice. He had to disappear from her life. Chapter 7. Leaving her to protect her. Adrian's fingers tightened around his phone. He wanted to text Fiona, wanted to tell her to leave New York immediately, to never come back. But he knew she wouldn't leave just because of a message. She was a doctor, a woman who lived for her patients. She wouldn't run. The only thing Adrian could do was make her leave him. The last meeting. The next day, Adrian asked Fiona to meet him. This time, he took her to a luxurious restaurant, a real 3-star Michelin venue. He wanted their final moment together to be perfect. But Fiona, she could sense something was wrong, because today, Adrian wasn't the persistent, playful man who chased after her relentlessly. He had become cold, distant, just like the first time she had seen him in the hospital. After dinner, as they stepped outside, Fiona couldn't hold back anymore. Adrian, is there something you want to tell me? He looked at her, his lips curling into a gentle smile, but one filled with pain. No. Fiona's brows furrowed. You're hiding something. Adrian lowered his head and pressed a final kiss to her forehead. This is where we end, Fiona. She froze and her eyes widened in shock, unable to process what she had just heard. Oh, what? I don't want this anymore. Her chest tightened, as if something inside her was being crushed. You're joking, right? He shook his head. You were just a temporary distraction. The words sliced through her like a blade. She couldn't believe it. The man who had spent days relentlessly chasing her, who had done everything to be close to her. Could he really throw her away so easily like an old useless object? She couldn't breathe. She wanted to scream. She wanted to slap him. She wanted to call him a bastard. But instead, she simply turned and walked away. A heartbreak shared by two. As Fiona disappeared into the night, Adrian stood frozen under the dim streetlights, his hands clenched tightly into fists, his heart aching so much he could barely endure it. But this was the only way. If he walked away, his enemies wouldn't target her. If she hated him, she wouldn't be in danger anymore. Adrian lowered his head, hiding the redness in his eyes. He had lost her, but at least she was still alive. Chapter 8. The Cruel Truth. 3 months had passed. Winter had settled over New York, but nothing felt colder than the emptiness in Fiona's heart. Since the day Adrian had abruptly left her, she had tried to erase him from her mind, to convince herself that he was nothing but a fleeting mistake. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't. Every time she walked past familiar streets, every time someone mentioned his name, the pain resurfaced, sharp and unrelenting. She had told herself 100 times that he was a terrible man, that he had only seen her as a temporary amusement. But despite everything, she still couldn't forget him. She still remembered his reckless smirk, his teasing words, the way he had cared for her when she was sick. And yet Adrian had disappeared from her life as if he had never existed. That night, while on her usual hospital shift, the emergency room doors suddenly burst open with such force that it sent a shiver down her spine. Shouts filled the air. Footsteps echoed through the corridor. Get a doctor now! The patient is critical. He's losing too much blood. A group of men in black rushed in, carrying someone barely conscious on a stretcher. Fiona instinctively stepped forward, prepared to do her job. But as her eyes landed on the man lying on the stretcher, her world stopped. Adrian? The name barely escaped her lips, her hands falling to her sides as she stood frozen in place. Even though his body was still, she recognized him instantly. His dark hair, sharp brows, striking features. But now his face was pale, lifeless. Blood had soaked through his once white shirt, staining it deep crimson. The trail of red followed them onto the hospital floor, a terrifying sight that made her stomach twist. A cold dread crept into her bones. The man who had walked out of her life 3 months ago, the man she had tried so hard to forget, was now lying in front of her, teetering on the edge of death. Fiona, please, save him. A desperate voice rang out, and she turned to see one of Adrian's men kneeling before her, his eyes filled with raw pleading. He was ambushed. A bullet went straight through his chest. He's lost too much blood. If we don't operate now, he won't make it. Fiona swallowed hard, forcing herself to breathe. She was a doctor. She couldn't afford to let emotions interfere. But this was Adrian, the man she had convinced herself to hate but never could. Her hands trembled as she reached out to touch his body. He was cold, too cold. Prepare the operating room, now, she commanded, her voice sharp but unsteady. The nurses quickly wheeled Adrian towards surgery, but before they could go, a weak hand suddenly grasped her wrist. The grip was faint, barely there, but it held on to her as if refusing to let go. Fiona's breath caught in her throat. Adrian's eyes fluttered open, hazy with pain, but in them burned something deeper, something unspoken. Fiona! His voice was barely a whisper, hoarse and broken, but it sent a tremor through her entire body. Her fingers tightened around his, and then, through cracked lips, he uttered the words that shattered her heart. I will always love you. And with that, his hand slipped from hers as consciousness left him. Fiona felt the air leave her lungs as if the world had collapsed around her. She stood motionless, her heart pounding violently, screaming at her to say something, to call out his name, to beg him to stay. But Adrian had already slipped away, his body lifeless as he was rushed into surgery, her hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms as the hospital doors swung shut, separating them once again. Gasping for breath, she stumbled into the hallway, her mind spinning. 3 months ago, Adrian had looked her in the eyes and told her she meant nothing. He had said he didn't want her anymore. But now, in his weakest moment, he had told her he had always loved her. Which one was the truth? Had he lied to her back then? Had he pushed her away to protect her? Why had he left? And why, despite everything, did it hurt so much? The surgery lasted for 3 agonizing hours. Every precise incision Fiona made on Adrian's body felt as if it were cutting into her own heart. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to stay steady. She would not let him die. She had already lost him once, and she refused to go through that pain again. When the surgery finally ended, Adrian was still alive, but he had fallen into a deep coma. The chief surgeon looked at her with a measured expression and spoke gently. "Now, it's up to his will to live." Fiona nodded, but inside her heart felt like it was breaking apart. Adrian had once walked away from her life, leaving nothing but unanswered questions and unbearable pain. But this time, she wouldn't let him go. Whether he woke up or not, she would stay by his side. Because now, for the first time, she understood the truth. She loved him, and no matter what happened, she couldn't bear to lose him again. Chapter 9. Back from the dead. 3 months. 90 endless days. From the moment Adrian fell into a coma, Fiona never left his side. She told herself and others that it was simply her duty as a doctor, that she was merely fulfilling her professional responsibility. But deep down, she knew she was lying to herself. If it was just duty, she wouldn't have spent every night by his bedside. If it was just duty, she wouldn't have clutched his hand so tightly, whispering to him that he wasn't allowed to leave her again. If it was just duty, she wouldn't have cried silently through the lonely nights, watching him lie motionless, feeling like her heart was being crushed with every second that passed. Every single day, she clung to the hope that he would wake up. "Still no signs of improvement?" the chief surgeon asked, his tone somber. Fiona shook her head. She had waited for so long, yet Adrian remained unresponsive. She had done everything, dressed his wounds, massaged his muscles to prevent stiffness, read to him, talked to him. She had given him every possible reason to come back, but Adrian remained silent, trapped somewhere between life and death. "You know, Dr. Carter," a nurse said with a knowing smile, "I've never seen you care about a patient like this before." Fiona didn't know how to respond, because Adrian wasn't just a patient to her. He was the man she had once hated, yet the same man who had stolen her heart. He was the man who had taken care of her when she was sick, the man who had looked at her with a tenderness hidden behind his dangerous exterior. He was the man who had told her he loved her before slipping into the darkness. And so every day, whether he could hear her or not, she whispered to him, "Adrian, you have to wake up. You still owe me an explanation. You never told me why you left 3 months ago, and you don't even know that I love you." That day it rained. After gently wiping his face and hands, Fiona sat beside him as always, holding his hand in hers. "Adrian, if you don't wake up soon, I'm going to be really angry," she murmured, her voice soft but filled with the kind of pain only she could understand. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his hand, exhaustion finally catching up to her. She was so tired. For 3 months, she had barely slept, afraid that if she left his side, he would slip away forever. She closed her eyes for just a moment, and then a finger twitched. Fiona's entire body stiffened. She snapped her head up, her heart pounding wildly. "Adrian?" No response, but she had seen it. His fingers, they moved. And then a hoarse whisper. "Fiona!" She froze, staring at him in disbelief. Slowly, those familiar blue eyes fluttered open, their sharpness dulled by weakness, yet carrying a warmth she had never seen before. He looked at her. She looked at him. And in that moment, the entire world stopped. "You're still here?" His voice was weak, but there was something in it, something unspoken, something fragile yet full of meaning. Fiona bit her lip, tears welling up in her eyes. "Did you really think I'd just leave you? You idiot," she whispered, gripping his hand tighter. His fingers curled slightly around hers, warmer than before, as if life had finally returned to him. Adrian tried to move, but he was still too weak, yet he didn't care, because the only thing that mattered to him was Fiona. She swallowed hard, struggling to steady her voice. "You've been asleep for too long, Adrian." He let out a faint chuckle, his lips curving into the ghost of a smirk. "I was waiting for something." She frowned. "Waiting for what?" "For you to realize," he exhaled weakly, but his gaze never wavered, "that you can't live without me." Fiona felt her breath catch. She wanted to scold him, wanted to laugh, wanted to call him a narcissist, but she couldn't, because he was right. She couldn't live without him anymore. With a shaky sigh, she squeezed his hand tighter. "You know, I was so angry at you these past 3 months." "I know. I told myself I would forget you. I know that too. But I couldn't." This time Adrian didn't answer. He just looked at her, really looked at her, and in his eyes was something deeper than words, something that had been there all along, but had never been said aloud. Finally he spoke. "I'm sorry." Fiona let out a quiet, almost bitter laugh. "Sorry for what?" Adrian lifted his hand, still weak, still trembling, but strong enough to touch her cheek. "Sorry for leaving you." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "Then, you're not going to leave again, right?" Adrian took a slow, deep breath, then laced his fingers through hers, squeezing firmly. "Never." That day, Adrian Russo came back to life. His recovery shocked the entire hospital, but only Fiona knew. He had returned because of her. When he was strong enough to speak again, he looked at her and said, "I'm leaving everything behind. The mafia, the money, the power. I don't need any of it anymore. I just need you." Fiona laughed softly, shaking her head. "Are you sure? A former mafia boss leaving it all behind to become a normal man?" Adrian shrugged, his signature smirk making a comeback. "As long as you're with me, I'll do anything." She stared at him, her heart full in a way she had never known before. And finally she smiled. "Then Adrian Russo, welcome home." This time she wouldn't let him go. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the quiet beachside house. Gentle waves kissed the shore, their soft rhythm lulling the world into peace. Standing on the balcony, Adrian took a deep breath, for the first time in years feeling truly at ease. No more chasing, no more gunfire, no more shadows lurking in the night. Just him and Fiona. Chapter 10. Starting a new life. After being discharged from the hospital, Adrian sold everything. His properties, his businesses, his ties to the underworld. He had once ruled an empire, controlled wealth and power beyond imagination. But in the end, he realized that none of it mattered if Fiona wasn't by his side. They left the bustling city behind, moving to a small coastal town where life was quieter, simpler. Fiona opened a small clinic, continuing her work as a doctor, treating patients with the same dedication and compassion she always had. Meanwhile, Adrian, once a feared mafia boss, became a protector of street children. He gave them hope, shelter, and a chance at a better life, something he had once desperately wished for as a child. One day, a young boy looked up at him with wide eyes, hesitating before asking, "Mr. Russo, is it true that you used to be a mafia boss?" Adrian chuckled, ruffling the boy's hair. "I used to be a very foolish man." The boy blinked. "Are you happy now?" Adrian turned to glance at the small clinic, where Fiona was laughing with a child patient. "Yes," he said without hesitation, "because happiness wasn't about money or power. It was about being with the one you love forever." One evening, as they sat together on the beach, watching the waves roll in under the soft glow of the moon, Adrian suddenly reached for Fiona's hand, his eyes serious. "I lost you once," he said, his voice deep and steady. Fiona turned to him, a soft smile on her lips. But in the end, you still came back. This time, I want to make sure I'll never lose you again. He stood up, then knelt down on one knee. Fiona's breath hitched. There was no extravagant setup, no grand display of wealth. Just a simple silver ring, engraved with the word, forever. I have nothing to promise you except my love, he said, his voice filled with raw sincerity. I have no power, no wealth, only myself, and a love that will never fade. Fiona looked at the man before her, her heart pounding. He was the man who had once driven her crazy with his persistence and teasing. The man who had left her to protect her. The man who had fought his way back to her, defying everything just to be by her side. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of happiness. I've been waiting for this question for a long time, Adrian Russo, she whispered. She held out her hand, letting him slip the ring onto her finger. And my answer is yes. They didn't have a lavish wedding. There were no elite guests, no armed guards standing watch. Just their closest friends, the street children Adrian had helped, and the young patients from Fiona's clinic. Fiona wore a simple white dress, yet to Adrian she was the most beautiful bride in the world. He stood beside her in a beige suit, no longer a mafia king, but a man ready to start a new life. Are you sure about this? Adrian murmured as they stood before the priest. Fiona laughed, squeezing his hand. Do you still not believe that I love you? Adrian leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. I just wanted to hear you say it again, he whispered. Fiona looked into his eyes, her gaze unwavering. Adrian Russo, she said clearly, I love you. His heart pounded harder than ever before. This time he knew. He had truly won her. After the wedding, they continued their peaceful life together. Mornings were spent at the clinic, where Fiona treated patients while Adrian helped around or looked after the children in town. Evenings were spent cooking together, talking about their day, watching the ocean waves crash against the shore. One night as they lay on the couch, Adrian smirked. Do you ever regret it? Giving up a powerful mafia boss to marry an ordinary man like me? Fiona chuckled, resting her head on his shoulder. Not at all, because I never loved that mafia boss. She lifted her head, gazing at him with warmth. I love Adrian Russo, the man who changed for me, the man who gave up everything just for a simple life with me. Adrian squeezed her hand, his heart full in a way he had never known before. In the end, happiness required nothing extravagant, just someone to love and someone who loves you in return. Love wasn't about possession. It was about patience, sincerity, and the willingness to change for each other. Adrian had once been a ruthless mafia boss, but for Fiona, he had chosen to walk away from power, to become a better man, not for the world, not for redemption, but simply for her. Fiona had learned that love wasn't always grand or perfect, but real and raw. In the end, true love was about sacrifice, devotion, and walking through every storm together until they finally reached happiness. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your support means the world, and The sky over Riviera Azul was painted in a brilliant shade of orange as the sun gradually dipped below the horizon. Gentle waves lapped against the smooth shoreline, carrying the soothing melody of the ocean. The air was infused with the salty scent of the sea, mingling with the tropical breeze, evoking a sense of tranquility that anyone would long for upon stepping foot in this paradise retreat. Amidst this perfect scenery, Miles Sterling walked along the shoreline, but his mind was far from at ease like the other vacationers enjoying their stay. At 35, Miles was a formidable name in the business world. As the CEO of Sterling Innovations, one of the leading technology conglomerates in the world, he stood at the pinnacle of success, possessing everything a man could dream of: wealth, fame, power. Yet when night fell and billion-dollar deals no longer occupied his thoughts, an emptiness settled within him like an inescapable void. That was why he despised idle moments. Work was the only thing that made him feel like he wasn't completely lost. But tonight, everything was about to change. Miles hadn't planned to come to the beach. Initially, he had intended to stay in his hotel room, finishing a few important calls before the conference the next day. But the sound of the waves and the peaceful atmosphere outside had drawn him away from the cold, sterile walls. He strolled slowly, his expensive loafers sinking slightly into the fine sand, his hands unconsciously slipping into his pockets, until he saw her. In that moment, the entire world seemed to stand still. Not far from him, a woman sat on the sand, her soft brown hair billowing in the sea breeze. She wore a simple white maxi dress, yet even in that simplicity, she was breathtakingly beautiful. Under the golden hues of the sunset, she was as serene as a painting, yet her presence struck him with a force that made his chest tighten. Camilla Carter, the only woman he had ever loved, and the one he had lost. Miles froze, but before he could steady himself, his gaze fell upon the two children playing in front of Camilla. A boy and a girl. Both had chestnut brown hair and smooth, delicate skin. The boy's face bore an uncanny resemblance to how he had looked as a child. Miles felt the blood in his veins turn to ice. He stood still on the beach, his heart pounding violently against his ribs. His breath became ragged as his mind scrambled to process what was unfolding before him. Impossible. He stared at the children. There was no way they could be this old if Camilla had given birth to them after their divorce. He sifted through his memories, mentally calculating the time. 8 years. No, it couldn't be. In that moment, his entire world crumbled. He had 2 children, and he had never known they existed. Welcome to today's story. Let us know which city you're watching from. Wishing you good health, happiness, and peace. We hope to bring you a little joy and warmth through our stories. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to become a part of the Soul Stories family. Once upon a time, Miles Sterling and Camilla Carter were the perfect couple. They met when they were both young and full of dreams. Camilla was a promising artist with a passion for sculpting and painting, while Miles was an ambitious entrepreneur building his career from scratch. Their love was pure, untainted by material concerns. When they got married, Miles had nothing but a small startup. The early days of their marriage were the happiest moments of Camilla's life. She believed, with all her heart, that no matter how rich or poor they became, no matter how difficult or easy life was, Miles would always be the man who put his family above all else. But everything changed. Sterling Innovations skyrocketed from a struggling tech startup to a billion-dollar empire. With success came an overwhelming workload. The romantic dates disappeared. The shared dinners became a luxury. Miles was constantly traveling for business, drowning in late-night meetings. Camilla tried to be understanding. She tried to be patient. She loved him and convinced herself that it was just a phase. She was wrong. That night, Camilla had prepared a special dinner. She remembered it vividly. It was their 4th wedding anniversary. She had spent the entire afternoon cooking, chosen her most beautiful dress, and set the table perfectly. But Miles never came home. He didn't call. He didn't text. At first, she thought he was just caught up at work. But when the clock struck 11, an uneasiness settled in her chest. She called him. No answer. Then she made a decision. She was going to find him. She drove to the Sterling Innovations office, but the building was deserted. A security guard recognized her and hesitated before saying softly, "Mr. Sterling isn't here, but I saw him leaving with Ms. Rachel." Rachel. Camilla knew her, a high-ranking executive who always looked at Miles with admiration, and something more. But Miles had told her that there was nothing between them, just business. Yet on their anniversary, he was with that woman. Camilla didn't need anyone to explain further. Her instincts told her something far worse. She drove to the hotel where Sterling Innovations often held events, and there, she saw something she could never erase from her memory. Through the glass doors of the hotel lobby, she saw Miles and Rachel stepping out of the elevator. Their intimacy was undeniable. Rachel was still smiling, her red lips slightly swollen, as if she had just been kissed. Miles looked a little tired, but his eyes held no guilt. He didn't even notice Camilla standing just a few steps away. What did it feel like? Like her heart was being crushed, the pain spreading through every inch of her body. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't cry. There was only a hollow emptiness settling in her chest. Camilla turned and walked away. That was the last time she ever saw Miles as her husband. Camilla didn't stay to hear any explanations. That very night, she packed her bags and walked out of the home they had once shared. No messages, no goodbyes. All she knew was that she couldn't stay with a man who had betrayed her. In the days that followed, Miles tried desperately to reach her. He called dozens of times, sent hundreds of messages. He searched for her at their friends' houses, reached out to her family, but no one knew where she had gone. Camilla had severed all ties. She was determined to disappear from his life. She never regretted that decision. But just weeks after leaving, she discovered a truth even crueler than Miles's betrayal. She was pregnant. Camilla was devastated. A part of her considered telling Miles, but then she remembered the image seared into her memory. That night at the hotel, the way he had chosen another woman while they were still married. How could she trust that he would be a good father? She made the decision to raise her children alone, without any help from Miles Sterling. And so for the past 8 years, Camilla Carter had been a single mother, raising 2 children on her own, never letting them know about the man who had once betrayed their family. Now standing before Miles on the beach, Camilla felt the familiar sting of an old wound. She was no longer the naive woman she had once been, no longer the wife who had foolishly believed in eternal love. She was a strong, independent mother who had fought to give Tom and Lisa a good life, without the support of Miles Sterling. Yet here he was. Miles looked as though he had been punched in the chest. His eyes were wide with disbelief, as if he couldn't process what he was seeing. His lips parted, but for a moment, no words came out. He swallowed hard, glancing at the 2 children before turning back to Camilla. They're mine? A flicker of pain crossed Camilla's face, but she quickly masked it with a cold, composed expression. It's too late, Miles, she replied, her voice devoid of emotion. He shook his head, stepping forward slightly, as if he wanted to reach for her, but didn't dare. You never told me. If I had known... Camilla let out a bitter laugh, one filled with years of unspoken resentment. If you had known, what would you have done? She challenged. Would you have left her and come back to me? Would you have accepted our children but still kept your affair going? Miles, you were never the kind of man who could be a husband and a father at the same time. He flinched. She was right. Camilla turned away, her gaze guarded. You don't have to play the role of a remorseful father, Miles. They don't need you. Her words sliced through him like a blade. They don't need you. The sentence echoed in his mind like a curse. But as Miles looked at the 2 children, his children, he knew he couldn't let them slip away. No matter how much Camilla hated him, no matter how much she tried to push him away, he wasn't going to leave. This time he would fight for the family he had lost. At this moment, Miles had never felt more powerless. He could command a multi-billion-dollar corporation, sign contracts worth hundreds of millions without hesitation. Yet now, standing before Camilla and the 2 children, he was just a man drowning in regret. Camilla, please. His voice was hoarse. I never knew about them. If I had, I swear I would never have let them grow up without a father. Camilla crossed her arms, her gaze cold as the night sea. If you truly cared about family, Miles, you wouldn't have betrayed me. Her words cut through him like a blade. He knew he had made a mistake that couldn't be undone. But was there still a chance to make things right? He swallowed the pain and stepped forward. But Camilla immediately took a step back. I just want to talk to them, Camilla. His voice softened, pleading. I don't expect you to forgive me. But the children, they have the right to know who their father is. Camilla let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. You think you can walk into their lives after 8 years and expect everything to be fine? Miles clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay calm. I know I can't make up for the years I missed, but I want to do everything I can to be a part of their lives. Camilla studied him for a long time, her gaze filled with doubt and pain. She still remembered that night, the moment when her trust and love were shattered without mercy. Miles, you betrayed me once. How can I trust that you won't abandon your children? Miles stiffened at her words. He couldn't blame her for thinking that way. When they were married, he had put his work above his family. He had left her alone in long, lonely nights. He had deceived her. Now how could he ask her to believe he would be a good father? I'm not going anywhere, Miles said firmly. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I will never abandon Tom and Lisa. If you don't believe me, let me prove it. Camilla pressed her lips together, her heart in turmoil. She had lived 8 years without him. She had protected her children from any pain connected to their past. But now Miles was here, and she feared he would bring back heartbreak, not just for her, but for Tom and Lisa as well. I can't let you walk into their lives, only to leave again like nothing ever happened. Miles met her gaze, his expression unwavering. I won't leave. Whether you want me to or not, I am their father. Camilla clenched her fists. She couldn't let her emotions take over. Just then, a small voice broke the tense silence. Mommy, who is that? Camilla turned around, her heart clenching, as she saw Tom and Lisa standing a short distance away, their eyes wide with curiosity. Miles held his breath as he looked at them. Tom had dark brown hair, sharp eyes, and a face that was an exact replica of his younger self. Lisa had round cheeks and Camilla's bright blue eyes, filled with innocent curiosity. They were a part of him, yet they felt like strangers. Camilla hesitated. She didn't want to lie to her children, but she also couldn't let them know the truth so easily. He's an old friend, she said slowly. Miles felt his chest tighten. An old friend. He should have been their father. He should have been there for their first steps, to tell them bedtime stories, to teach Tom how to play sports and tie Lisa's hair into ponytails. But he wasn't, because he had lost his family. Tom tilted his head, suspicion flickering in his eyes. If he's a friend, why have we never met him before? Lisa tugged at her mother's hand, looking up at Camilla. He looks a lot like Tom. Miles closed his eyes briefly, struggling to hold back his emotions. He couldn't lose them. Slowly, Miles knelt in front of them, making sure not to overwhelm them. My name is Miles, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I was once very important to your mother. Tom frowned while Lisa continued to study him intently. So you're Mommy's friend? Tom asked. Miles forced a smile, but there was a deep sorrow behind it. Not exactly. Camilla gripped Lisa's hand tightly, her breathing unsteady. She wasn't ready for this truth to come out. But Miles was. He couldn't lie to his own children. He couldn't let this moment slip away. The truth is, Miles took a deep breath, his gaze full of love as he looked at them. I'm your father. Silence. Camilla clenched her fists, her heart pounding. She wasn't ready for Tom and Lisa to know this. Tom and Lisa stared at him, then at each other before turning back to Miles. Dad? Tom repeated as if the word was foreign to him. Lisa clung to her mother's hand, her voice trembling. Mommy, is that true? Camilla hesitated, but in the end she couldn't lie. She nodded slightly. Lisa blinked, still trying to understand what it all meant. But Tom, he studied Miles, his expression unreadable, his young mind processing the truth. Then, where were you all this time? Tom finally asked. The question felt like a knife to Miles's heart. Where had he been? He had been living a life of luxury while his children grew up without a father. He had convinced himself that the past was behind him, when in reality, he had never even tried to find Camilla. He had missed everything. I didn't know, Miles admitted, his voice breaking. If I had known, I would have been here for you both a long time ago. Tom stared at him for a long moment, then turned to his mother. Why didn't you tell him? Camilla felt her throat tighten. She didn't want her children to suffer. She didn't want them to be caught in a web of heartbreak and betrayal. But now, looking into her son's eyes, she realized that the truth was something they deserved to know. I was only trying to protect you, she whispered. Tom looked back at Miles, his sharp eyes filled with mixed emotions. So what happens now? Miles took a deep breath, his gaze steady. Now, I will do everything I can to make it up to you. Despite Camilla's cold distance and the children's hesitation to accept him, Miles refused to give up. The next morning, he found himself at the resort's playground, where Tom and Lisa were playing under Camilla's watchful eyes. She sat on a nearby bench with a book in hand, but her gaze never strayed far from her children. Miles took a deep breath and stepped toward them. Good morning, kids, he greeted, keeping his tone as light as possible. Tom turned his head, his expression still wary. Lisa, on the other hand, blinked at him, still trying to process the idea of having a father in her life. Dad, would you like to go boating with us? Lisa suddenly asked in a small voice. Camilla's head snapped up, her brows furrowing, but before she could say anything, Tom crossed his arms and nodded. All right, he said, his tone challenging. Let's see if you're any better at it than me. Miles chuckled, though his heart pounded in his chest from the sheer emotion of the moment. Fair competition, then? They set out on the water together, with Miles carefully guiding Lisa on how to balance, while Tom, quick and observant, was already maneuvering his small boat across the waves. The boy remained quiet, but Miles noticed the flicker of excitement in his son's eyes. Later in the afternoon, Miles took them to a kids' surfing class. Lisa eagerly jumped at the chance, while Tom hesitated, standing with his arms crossed, scanning the class intently before making a move. Miles picked up on it. You like to watch and analyze before taking action, don't you? He asked gently. Tom turned to him, a little surprised. How did you know? Miles chuckled. Because I was exactly like that when I was your age. Slowly, the gap between them seemed to shrink. That evening, while Lisa sat on the porch, drawing in her sketchbook, Miles approached her. What are you drawing? He asked. Lisa glanced up, pouting. I'm drawing our family, but I don't know how to draw you yet. Miles's heart clenched. He sat beside her and picked up a colored pencil. Maybe you can draw me on a boat with you, like today? Lisa considered it for a moment, then nodded. Okay, but you have to sit still while I draw you. Miles laughed. Understood, my little princess. From a distance, Camilla watched, a storm of emotions swirling inside her. Miles was trying. He was genuinely spending time with the children, laughing with them, teaching them new things. But how long would this last? He was Miles Sterling, a billionaire, the CEO of a global corporation. He could easily walk away from this, return to his luxurious life, and leave the children behind, just like he had left her. She couldn't let that happen. That night, as Miles stood on the balcony, gazing at the ocean, Camilla approached him. How long do you plan to stay? She asked, her voice cool. Miles turned to her, his gaze steady. As long as I can. Camilla frowned. You can't stay here forever, Miles. You have a company, a life of your own. Miles was quiet for a moment before answering softly. My life hasn't been whole since you left. Her heart wavered at his words, but she quickly reminded herself to stay rational. You think a few days can make up for 8 years? She challenged. Miles met her gaze without hesitation. Number? But I have to start somewhere, and I'm not stopping now. Camilla bit her lip. She didn't know if she could trust him again. The following days, Miles continued spending time with the children, and the more time he spent with them, the more he saw fragments of himself reflected in them. Tom's passion for technology, just like Miles. One afternoon, Miles found Tom sitting with his tablet, engrossed in reading about robotic programming. Do you like technology? He asked. Tom nodded enthusiastically. Of course! I want to build smart robots like Iron Man. Miles chuckled. Have you tried programming yet? Tom shook his head. I don't have anyone to teach me. Miles's chest tightened. If he had been present in Tom's life, the boy would have already had the chance to learn from him, but he had missed that opportunity. How about I teach you? Miles offered. Tom hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. All right, but you have to be better than me. Miles smirked. I think I can manage that. And so, father and son sat together, writing their first lines of code. Lisa's love for art, just like Camilla. Lisa loved to paint. She could spend hours sketching the world around her. One morning, Miles found her in the garden, working on a large canvas. What are you painting? He asked as he sat beside her. Lisa tilted her head. I'm painting a family, but I don't know how to draw you. Miles smiled, though a deep sadness settled in his heart. Would you like me to pose for you? He suggested. Lisa considered it for a moment before nodding. But you have to stay still. No moving. Miles feigned seriousness. Understood, my little artist? As Lisa dipped her brush into the paint, Miles watched her with a tender gaze. The way she concentrated reminded him so much of Camilla. And at that moment, he realized something profound. Lisa was a reflection of Camilla, sensitive, artistic, and full of emotion. Tom was a reflection of himself, curious, intelligent, and determined. Looking at them, Miles felt an overwhelming sense of regret for all the years he had missed. He had missed Tom's first steps, Lisa's first words. He had missed family dinners, bedtime stories, and all the small but meaningful moments that made up their lives. But now he wouldn't miss another second. Miles Sterling had made his decision. He would do whatever it took to be a part of his children's lives. The scandal breaks. A secret family? News of Miles Sterling's stay at Riviera Azul spread quickly. But what caught public attention wasn't his participation in the business conference. It was a leaked photograph of him playing with two children on the beach. The image immediately went viral, splashed across the front pages of major newspapers, accompanied by sensational headlines. Billionaire Miles Sterling's secret family? Sterling Innovations heirs finally revealed? Miles Sterling hid his children for years. Miles was in his hotel room when he received the news. He unlocked his phone to find his inbox flooded with messages, journalists, business partners, and even employees from his company all demanding answers. One particular photo stood out. Lisa clinging tightly to his neck, while Tom looked up at him with a mix of curiosity and contemplation. The image warmed his heart, but at the same time he knew this wasn't going to be easy. Right now, his biggest concern wasn't his company, it was Camilla's reaction. Miles's confrontation with the board. The following morning, Miles received an urgent call from the board of directors. Miles, this is becoming a serious problem. Richard Caldwell, one of the major shareholders of Sterling Innovations, said in a grave tone. Do you have any idea how much our stock has dropped? Investors are worried about the company's image. I understand, Miles replied calmly, but this is my personal matter. It has nothing to do with the company. Nothing to do with the company? Another voice cut in sharply. Miles, you are the face of Sterling Innovations. If the media continues to dig into your private life, it will damage our brand. The board has discussed this, and if you don't resolve it properly, we may have to force you to step down. Miles clenched his phone tightly. He had spent his entire life building Sterling Innovations, yet now they were willing to push him out over a personal matter. But even as the weight of their ultimatum pressed on him, his greatest concern wasn't the company, it was his children. If the media continued their pursuit, Tom and Lisa would be the ones most affected. I'll handle this, Miles said firmly, but I will not abandon my family again. Rachel's return. That evening, Miles received a call from an unknown number. Miles, it's been a long time. He recognized the voice instantly. Rachel Lancaster, the woman who had shattered his marriage and the one mistake he wished he could erase. I heard you're in Riviera Azul. Her voice was silky but laced with manipulation. Can we meet? Miles's jaw tightened. There's nothing to talk about, Rachel. She laughed softly. Still as cold as ever. But I think you'll want to hear this. The rumors about your secret family could get worse if the press finds out that the mother of your children is Camilla. Miles's grip on the phone tightened. What do you want? Let's meet. Just a conversation, like old friends. Miles knew Rachel too well. She never did anything without an ulterior motive, but he couldn't risk her getting anywhere near Camilla or the kids. Camilla's misunderstanding. Miles arrived at the cafe Rachel had chosen, unaware that fate had other plans. Camilla hadn't meant to follow him. She had simply been passing by when her eyes landed on a sight that made her stomach twist. Miles sitting across from Rachel, the woman who had destroyed their marriage. Rage surged through her. She had begun to believe that Miles genuinely wanted to change. She had seen his effort with Tom and Lisa, seen him try to rebuild a connection with them. But now here he was, sitting with her. Camilla's hands balled into fists as she strode straight into the cafe. I was wrong to think you actually regretted anything. Her voice, ice cold, cut through the air like a blade. Both Miles and Rachel turned to her, startled. Miles immediately stood. Camilla, this isn't what you think. Rachel smirked. leaning back in her chair. "Oh, what a surprise. It's been a while, hasn't it, Camilla?" Camilla shot her a withering glare before turning back to Miles. "I really thought you wanted to change. But clearly you're still the same, always running back to her." Miles's brows furrowed. "Camilla, listen to me. This isn't... Don't make excuses." Her voice was sharp, cutting off whatever defense he had. "I won't let you hurt me again, and I won't let you deceive our children either." Then, without another word, she turned and walked out. Miles felt as though the ground beneath him had crumbled. Rachel took a sip of her coffee, her smirk widening. "Well, it looks like you just lost your second chance." Miles's fist clenched. He had already lost Camilla once, but this time he refused to let her slip away again. No matter what it took, he would prove to her that he was truly remorseful, that he was capable of being a real father. Because if he lost her again, he knew he would never forgive himself. Miles's proof through actions. Miles knew that words alone would never be enough to make Camilla believe him. She had once loved him, once placed all her trust in him, but he had betrayed her. No amount of apologies could mend the wounds of the past, so he decided to prove himself through actions. The very next morning, Miles organized a press conference at the Riviera Azul Hotel. Reporters flooded into the conference hall, camera flashes illuminating the room as he stepped up to the podium. Taking a deep breath, Miles surveyed the crowd. He wasn't just speaking to the media, he was speaking to Camilla, whether she was there to hear him or not. "I know there have been a lot of rumors circulating about me and 2 children over the past few days. Today, I want to set the record straight." The room fell into silence. 10 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I betrayed the woman I loved most. I lost her, and I didn't even know that I had also lost 2 children in the process. The crowd murmured. Pens scribbled across notepads and recording devices clicked on. "I won't deny my past. I made a mistake, and I won't make excuses for it. But there is one thing I want everyone to know. I will never let my family suffer because of my failures again." Miles looked straight into the camera. "Starting today, I will devote more time to my family. I will not let my work steal the precious moments I have with my children. And for those who still doubt me, I will prove myself through my actions." Backlash from the board of directors. Miles's public declaration spread quickly, but not everyone was pleased. That afternoon, the board of directors of Sterling Innovations called an emergency meeting. Walking into the boardroom, Miles was met with the stern faces of the company's most powerful stakeholders. "Miles, are you playing games with this company's future?" Richard Caldwell, one of the company's most influential shareholders, glared at him. "You went on national television and declared that you would be stepping back from your responsibilities? Did you think the board would just let that slide?" "I'm not playing games, Richard," Miles replied calmly. "I've spent over a decade building this company, but that doesn't mean I should have to sacrifice my family for it." "This company is your life," another board member interjected. "If you can't dedicate yourself fully to it, you don't deserve to be CEO." Miles scanned the room, his gaze unwavering. Slowly he nodded. "You're right. I can't continue as CEO if I can't balance work and family." The room fell silent. "So, I'm resigning." Gasps filled the air. "What did you just say?" Richard's eyes widened. Miles stood up, placing his hands firmly on the table. "I'm resigning," he repeated, his voice resolute. "Effective immediately. This company is important, but my family is more important." The board members exchanged stunned glances. No one had expected Miles Sterling, the man who had built Sterling Innovations from the ground up, to walk away so easily. But his mind was made up. He was no longer the man he had been 10 years ago. The man who had put his work above everything and lost the most important people in his life because of it. Camilla's realization. News of Miles's resignation spread like wildfire. When Camilla read about it, she could hardly believe her eyes. Miles Sterling, the man who had once been so consumed by ambition that he let it destroy their marriage, had given up his empire for the sake of his children? She had always believed that his attempts to make amends were temporary, just a way to ease his guilt. But this was different. That evening, when Miles arrived at the resort to see Tom and Lisa, Camilla watched him closely. He no longer carried the arrogance of a powerful CEO, nor did he wear the mask of a man who thought he could control everything. Standing before her was a man who had finally learned what truly mattered in life. "You really gave up the company?" Camilla asked, her voice quieter than usual. Miles nodded. "I won't let work take away another second of my time with Tom and Lisa." Camilla searched his face, looking for any sign of deception. But all she saw was sincerity. She wasn't ready to forgive him yet. But for the first time in years, she started to believe that maybe, just maybe, Miles Sterling had truly changed. As time passed, little by little, Miles became a part of Tom and Lisa's lives. At first, the children kept their distance, but he didn't give up. He patiently spent time with them, helping Tom assemble model airplanes, assisting Lisa in painting on the beach, and reading them bedtime stories every night. One morning, as Miles was helping Tom fix a broken toy car, the boy hesitated for a moment before whispering, "Dad, do you know how to put this wheel back on?" Miles froze. His heart seemed to stop for a second. He looked up at his son, then glanced at Camilla, who stood nearby, equally stunned. Lisa tugged at his sleeve, her big eyes shining. "Daddy, can you help me color this picture?" Miles felt a lump in his throat. He nodded, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I'll help you both, anytime you need me." For the first time, he truly felt like a father. For the first time, Tom and Lisa truly accepted him. Camilla watched everything from a distance, seeing how Miles cared for the children without forcing anything. He didn't try to win their affection with extravagant gifts, as she had once feared. Instead, he used patience, sincerity, and unconditional love to prove that he had changed. One afternoon, when Lisa slipped and fell on the beach, Miles rushed to catch her before Camilla could react. "It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy's here," he reassured her gently, brushing the sand off her tiny legs. Watching that scene, Camilla felt something soften inside her. After many trials, she could no longer deny one thing. Miles was truly trying. That evening, after the children had fallen asleep, Miles stepped onto the balcony where Camilla stood, gazing at the endless ocean. She didn't turn around, only continued watching the waves. "Thank you," he murmured. Camilla frowned slightly. "For what?" "For giving me the chance to be a father?" She was silent for a long moment before she replied softly, "It's for the children. They need their father." Miles didn't argue. He knew that, for Camilla, forgiveness wasn't easy, but at least she had opened a small door for him to step through. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the beach in a warm golden glow, Miles and Camilla walked side by side along the shore. The waves gently lapped at the sand, washing away their footprints as they strolled. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Only the sound of the ocean and the whisper of the breeze surrounded them. Then suddenly, Miles stopped. He turned to Camilla, his deep blue eyes reflecting the soft light of the setting sun. "I lost you once, Camilla." His voice was low, steady, sincere. "This time, I won't let that happen again." Camilla shivered slightly, though not from the cold. She lowered her gaze, her fingers tightening slightly around the fabric of her dress. "Miles," she started to say something but fell silent. Slowly, he reached out and took her hand. Camilla didn't pull away. In that moment, without words, they both understood. This was a new beginning. No rushed promises, no illusions of a perfect love, just a slow, steady path toward forgiveness, a trust being rebuilt piece by piece. This story is Miles's journey of redemption after making the greatest mistake of his life. He not only reclaimed his right to be a father, but also learned to become a better man, one who put his family above all else. Camilla, despite the scars she still carried, learned to give him the chance to prove that he had truly changed. And most importantly, Tom and Lisa finally had what they had always deserved, a complete family. Because sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting the past. It means learning to move forward together. Thank you for following this story. Let us know what you thought, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotional and powerful stories. Leave a comment. Share this story with others. Stay tuned for the next one. Until next time, love always wins.